104 arrested, $21.4 million exposed. FBI and ICE stormed a hidden
and $800,000 mansion seized. Multiple drug labs exposed. FBI and ICE uncovered a suburban empire hiding.
3 locations raided, 104 suspects arrested. A coordinated federal sweep collapsed a Chicago corridor cartel.
At 5:47 a.m. on a Thursday in June 2025, the suburb of Frankfort, Illinois, was the kind of quiet that only exists in places where nothing is supposed to happen. The sky was the pale gray of early morning, streaked with the first bruise of light from the east. Sprinklers ticked softly across manicured lawns. Neighbors hadn't yet pulled their curtains back. On Frankfort's western edge, a nearly $800,000 new construction home sat pristine at the end of a residential street, fresh concrete, immaculate landscaping, a house that had been purchased and paid off in full just 2 months prior. To every passing car, every dog walker, every school bus that rolled by, this was the home of a successful young man building a life. But to federal agents with the DEA, the FBI, and the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Northern District of Illinois, this was not a family home. This was the financial headquarters of a narcotics empire, and today it would fall. The man inside that house was James Howard, 32 years old, of Frankfort, Illinois. To his neighbors, he was quiet, polished, someone who had done well for himself young. To the DEA analysts who had been watching him for months, Howard was the operational architect of a fentanyl and cocaine distribution network that stretched across Chicago's entire southwest corridor, from Frankfort through Oak Lawn to a storage unit in Allsip on 115th Street. He moved product. He stockpiled weapons. He paid for nearly $1 million in real estate using cash that had no documented legitimate source. And the woman at the center of his operation, Chantel Robinson, 31, of Oak Lawn, was running a clandestine drug laboratory out of a third-floor apartment directly across from the Chicago Ridge Mall on 95th Street and Ridgeland Avenue, hidden in plain sight inside a building full of ordinary people living ordinary lives. Federal analysts had been building this case the way architects build load-bearing walls, one verified layer at a time. Surveillance units tracked movements between the Frankfort house, the Oak Lawn apartment, and the Allsip storage facility. Financial records flagged Howard's real estate transaction immediately. A man with no traceable income stream had walked in and paid cash for a brand new construction home in April 2025. That anomaly alone triggered deeper scrutiny. Communication intercepts followed. Patterns emerged. The operation wasn't small-time street dealing. It was structured, compartmentalized, and shielded behind the appearance of suburban normalcy. Investigators would later characterize Robinson's Oak Lawn apartment as a functional pharmaceutical laboratory where fentanyl was weighed, packaged, and prepared for street distribution on an industrial scale. Then came the decision that would end everything. Agents planted a concealed surveillance camera inside a flower pot at the entrance of Robinson's apartment building, a precise, surgical placement that gave federal eyes a direct line to the third floor. For days, it captured everything: movement, visitors, product being wrapped in bedsheets and carried out. Then, on a Tuesday, Robinson walked out of her unit, looked directly into the lens, and stopped. She had found it. She and Howard disconnected the device that same afternoon. But what they did next was the decision that sealed their fate. They did not stop. They did not run. They kept operating. By the time a grand jury signed off on the criminal complaint, federal agents understood the risk, and they moved anyway. At 5:47 a.m., the order went out. Tactical units deployed simultaneously. 3 locations, 1 grid, no margin for error. Frankfort, Oak Lawn, Allsip, synchronized, surgical. No announcement until the breach. The Frankfort house first. DEA agents moved in fast. Front door. Hard knock. Federal warrant. Howard was inside. The house was immaculate on the surface, the kind of clean that takes effort. But agents worked through it room by room, and the rooms gave up everything they were hiding. 25 firearms. Stacked. Loaded. Arranged with deliberate intent. Handguns. Semi-automatics. And then something that made agents pause mid-sweep. A box. Standard size. Unremarkable. Inside it were devices known as auto switches, mechanical conversion kits designed to transform standard Glock semi-automatic pistols into fully automatic machine guns. Not one. Not 2. An entire box. But that wasn't what stopped agents cold. Across the city, simultaneously, units breached Robinson's Oak Lawn apartment. The 3rd floor. The drug lab. Inside, agents found what surveillance had only partially revealed. The apartment had been converted into a processing operation, packaging materials, scales, chemical residue baked into the surfaces. And the product itself, 1.5 kilograms of fentanyl and approximately 850 grams of cocaine, discovered wrapped within bedsheets, the same way Howard had been filmed carrying them just days before. The smell hit agents at the door, sharp chemical, synthetic. The cold air of the apartment carried it like a signal. This was not a user's stash. This was a distribution center operating inside a residential building where dozens of unsuspecting tenants went about their lives one floor below. Then came the third location, the storage unit in Alsip. Units moved on the facility at 115th and Cicero. The unit rolled open. Inside, more narcotics, more weapons, wads of cash bound and stacked. The full financial and material backbone of the operation, stored 6 miles from the nearest evidence of who owned it. Investigators would later describe the Alsip unit as the operation's safety vault, the inventory reserve that kept the network supplied even when one node went dark. Howard was taken into custody at the Frankfurt house. Robinson was arrested. Both were transported to federal holding. Neither had resisted. But neither, according to agents on scene, had shown anything close to the shock of someone who didn't see it coming. Howard had seen the camera. He had known, and he had calculated incorrectly, that momentum and cash flow were stronger than a federal warrant. The Frankfurt mansion was only the beginning. 40 miles northeast, in the heart of Chicago's Little Village neighborhood, a parallel operation had been building for months, one that had started not with surveillance, but with blood. On October 8, 2025, Joel Andrade, 34, known in his neighborhood by the name Wedo, was sitting in a vehicle in the 2400 block of West 21st Place when multiple gunmen opened fire. Andrade survived. He was taken to hospital, treated for his injuries, and released to home confinement. What federal investigators observed next changed the scope of the entire case. Andrade did not step away from his cocaine distribution network. He escalated it. Directing operations from inside his own house, he transferred command to the mother of his children, Maria Brenda Moore Hernandez, 32, who began making deliveries, collecting payments, and moving narcotics and weapons across Chicago and into the western suburbs on his behalf. FBI wiretaps captured it all. 24 controlled cocaine purchases over 3 months. 14 made directly from Andrade. 10 routed through associates. Each transaction recorded. Each voice confirmed. On October 16, 2025, surveillance units watched Moore Hernandez leave the couple's Chicago residence and drive to a parking lot near a grocery store, where she handed a clear plastic bag containing nearly 29 grams of cocaine to a federal informant. Audio recording equipment captured the exchange. Laboratory analysis confirmed the substance. On November 14th, agents moved to intercept a vehicle driven by Associate Alexis Gutierrez, 43, of Riverside, who had been recorded over wiretap phones arranging a half-kilogram cocaine deal with Andrade. Gutierrez accelerated, crashed, threw a package from the window. DEA testing later confirmed it contained more than 1 pound of cocaine. Investigators would later realize the crash was not panic, it was protocol. The network had a standard response to attempted stops. Then came the revelation that elevated this from a trafficking case to something uglier. In mid-November, federal surveillance recorded Andrade orchestrating an armed robbery against one of his own suppliers, directing associates Richard Rubio, 33, and Alexis Andrade, 30, to steal 5 kilograms of cocaine from a source within the network itself. During the operation, Moore Hernandez personally retrieved a handgun from inside their Chicago residence and facilitated the movement of the stolen drugs. The network was not only trafficking, it was preying on itself, absorbing rival product through force, growing its inventory through violence. At 6:15 a.m. on January 29, 2026, a new order went out across 4 operational zones simultaneously: Chicago's Near West Side, the South Side, Villa Park, and the western suburbs. 7 of 9 charged defendants were taken in the first sweep. Little Village, agents breached the residence near 21st Street in Washtenaw, removing boxed evidence under the gaze of neighbors who had gathered at the end of the block. Villa Park, FBI executed a warrant at a secondary distribution address, seizing narcotics and communication devices. Downers Grove, Jeremy Rush, 34, taken without incident. Cicero, Jeremy Reyes Gonzalez, 21, arrested at a residential address. Riverside, Gutierrez, already known from the November crash, was taken into federal custody at his home. Rosemont and Addison, 2 additional distribution nodes identified in wiretap records, both shut down within the hour. Joel Andrade and Maura Hernandez, already in state custody in Cook County from a prior arrest, were formally charged with federal drug conspiracy, conspiracy to possess at least 5 kilograms of cocaine with intent to distribute, multiple counts of drug distribution, and firearms offenses. Their network, built quietly across 3 months of convalescence and coordination, ceased to exist by noon. By evening, the totality of both operations had produced numbers that federal prosecutors placed in the public record. 25 firearms seized, including an entire box of Glock auto switches capable of converting semi-automatic handguns into machine guns. More than 15 pounds of fentanyl recovered, enough to kill tens of thousands. Approximately 2 pounds of cocaine recovered across multiple locations. 9 defendants charged federally in the Andrade Maura Hernandez network alone. 3 simultaneous raid locations executed in the Howard Robinson operation. 1 clandestine drug laboratory dismantled inside a residential apartment building. 1 cash-purchased $800,000 mansion seized as evidence of drug proceeds. By evening, James Howard sat in a federal holding cell. No mansion keys. No firearms. No flower pot to inspect. Just a criminal complaint bearing his name in the Northern District of Illinois. Chantel Robinson sat 3 floors below the apartment she had converted into a laboratory. Joel Andrade, who had survived gunfire, directed operations from a hospital bed, and orchestrated armed robberies while recovering from wounds, sat in federal custody without the network that had kept him untouchable. Maria Brenda Maura Hernandez, who had stepped into command when her partner fell, faced charges identical to his. The communities of Frankfort, Oak Lawn, Little Village, Villa Park, and Downers Grove began processing what had been hidden inside their streets. Parents near the Chicago Ridge Mall learned that the building their children passed every day contained a functioning fentanyl laboratory. Residents of Little Village learned that the gunshots on West 21st Place in October had not ended anything. They had only shifted the chain of command. The DEA's Chicago Field Division announced formal reviews of financial transaction monitoring protocols across the southwest suburban corridor. Operation Corridor, as federal agents internally designated the combined takedown, proved something that law enforcement officials have had to relearn in every generation. The most effective criminal infrastructure does not announce itself. It buys new construction homes with cash. It rents apartments across from shopping malls. It wraps fentanyl in bedsheets. It keeps operating after finding the camera. It transfers command to the person you would least expect. And it runs not despite the normalcy around it, but because of it. The victims of this network were not abstract. They were the more than 1,000 Cook County residents who died from opioid overdoses in 2024 alone, the majority of them killed by the same synthetic poison that federal agents pulled from Robinson's third-floor apartment. They were children in buildings where product was being cut and packaged. They were neighbors who had no idea what was happening next door. The new construction house in Frankfort stands empty now. The flower pot is gone. The scars in these communities remain. But tonight, the men and women who built those empires answer for them, not in the streets they controlled, but in a federal courtroom where the only currency that matters is evidence, and the evidence was overwhelming.